Welcome to part 3 of our lecture on culture, art,
part 3?
and
How many
identity.
parts are there?
In the previous part, we talked about how painting was used by the Group of Seven to construct a Canadian identity, one particularly rooted in a sense of wilderness and harsh physical landscapes. In this part of the lecture, we're going to turn south and see how a form of Mexican painting was also very consciously used to construct national identities in that part of the continent. There's a long tradition in Mexico of mural painting. You'll recall in our lecture on colonization that the Olmec were an early civilization in pre-colonial Mexico. These Mexican indigenous peoples had painted murals, and when the colonizers arrived, they adopted the practice to further spread the message of Christianity. The more modern origins of Mexican mural painting can be traced to the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Remember that Mexico was politically dominated in the late 19th century by the government of Porfirio Diaz. While an oppressive and corrupt regime, it took steps to encourage Mexico's cultural development. It did so in part by sending promising artists to study artistic techniques abroad. One such artist was Gerardo Miro Conado, a painter from Jalisco who had learned painting from a young age and had then begun studies in the Academy of San Carlos in Mexico City. Murillo studied in France and Italy, but came away with the idea that Mexican art should reflect Mexican life. He was in effect rebelling against European forms and styles of painting, the very sort of art that the Diaz regime was most interested in reproducing by sending artists to study in Europe in the first place. Murillo, who came to be known as Dr. Atl, because this is how he signed his work, is credited with painting the first modern Mexican mural. He completed a series of nudes shortly before the outbreak of the Mexican Revolution of 1910. This momentous political event in Mexico's history, which saw Porfirio Diaz's government overthrown, was partly the result of a fusion of social, political, and ideological opposition to Diaz. And Dr. Atl's approach to art was very much in sync with this revolutionary line of thinking. Atl's approach to art was influential with three painters in particular, who would go on to be the leading artists in the mural movement: Jose Clemente Orozco, David Alfaro Siqueiros, and Diego Rivera. These three artists would come to be known as the Los Tres Grandes, or the Three Great Ones. Rivera, as we've already learned, would eventually marry Frida Kahlo. While the Diaz regime fell within the first year of the Mexican Revolution, bloody conflict would continue for a decade, as various factions fought to gain control. By 1921, the PRI had managed to secure power, and in fact it would go on to hold that power for some 70 years. With the revolution at an end, the PRI quickly identified a need to promote the ideals of the Mexican Revolution to the wider population. At the time, however, most Mexicans were illiterate. Jose Vasconcelos, you might remember him from an earlier lecture when we talked about race and his famous publication of The Cosmic Race, was appointed Secretary of Public Education. And he came up with the idea of the government funding large mural projects as a form of public education. Building on the long tradition of such art in Mexico, these murals would not simply be art for art's sake. Instead, they were social projects meant to promote certain ideals. Which ideals? Well, for starters, the revolution would be glorified, and the identity of Mexico as a mestizo nation would be confirmed. Indigenous, as well as Spanish identities would be asserted. Murals began to appear in many public buildings, including the Escuela Nacional Preparatoria, where Kahlo was a student and there met Diego Rivera while he was painting. A basic principle that underpinned this contemporary mural movement, especially given that it was occurring just in the wake of the Mexican Revolution, was the belief that Mexican art should be public, available to all citizens, and not just to wealthy collectors. While commissioned by the government, the artists generally had a free hand in expressing themselves through the paintings. As a result, in addition to promoting Mexico's indigenous and rural identities, the three main painters, including Rivera, incorporated Marxist elements in their work. They were all communists. The struggle of the working class against oppression is often present as a theme in the murals.
That's so crazy.
The great national myths related to the Mexican Revolution and the Mexican peoples themselves, created by these murals, are still very influential today. At the time when they were being painted, though, they were also seen as a form of healing from the horrific violence and experiences of the Revolution. While the Revolution was the key inspiration for the great mural artists, Rivera, Orozco, and Siqueiros, it's important to note that they differed in their artistic approaches. In fact, it's usually easy to tell which of the three may have painted a given mural. These differences are due in part to how each of the three artists experienced the actual revolution. Rivera was in Europe during the Mexican Revolution and never experienced it directly. He didn't fight in it. So his paintings tended to emphasize more the revolution's social benefits and less its violence. He also tended to be the most traditional in terms of painting style, drawing freely on European approaches to painting. Still, his themes were Mexican, and especially scenes of typical everyday life. Ancient Mexico was yet another favorite topic. He has very much shaped how Mexicans have come to understand their indigenous past, and even the colors that he would increasingly use in his murals emphasized earthy tones. By comparison, murals by Orozco were much more critical and pessimistic. Like his counterpart Siqueiros, he actually fought in the revolution, and his painting tended to take on angry tones. He emphasized human suffering and oppression, particularly at the hands of evil ruling classes. He absolutely condemned the Spanish as the destroyers of Mexico's indigenous cultures. He was much less likely to paint glorified depictions of the revolution and was more likely to paint its ugly violence. His work was often criticized as a consequence, and some of it was even defaced.
What's this one?
Finally, Siqueiros was the youngest and most radical of the trio. He fought in the revolution from the young age of 18 and experienced it from the front lines of fighting. He was a dedicated communist, and the proletarian working classes are commonly featured in his work. He was very futuristic and was fascinated by technology. His very radical politics eventually made him unwelcome in Mexico, so he did much of his work in South America. Nonetheless, he did absolutely leave his mark on his home country. The Polychrome Cultural Siqueiros in Mexico City is his masterpiece. It's been almost a century since the mural movement began, and Mexican artists still today produce murals that especially emphasize the mestizo message that has been a central theme from the beginning. Their work even influenced artists in other countries, where mural painting came to be seen as an effective tool for promoting social and political ideas. This was especially true in other countries in the Americas. All three of the Los Tres Grandes spent time in the U.S., with Rivera living there with Frida Kahlo from 1930 to 1934. He painted incredible murals in San Francisco and Detroit. The one he attempted to complete for the Rockefeller Center in New York was mired in controversy when he painted communist revolutionary Vladimir Lenin within the mural. When he refused to paint Lenin out, he was ordered to leave. Luckily, one of his assistants managed to take some pictures, and Rivera later repainted a version of it when he returned to Mexico in the Palacio de Bellas Artes in Mexico City. I hope you can see from this part of the lecture just how effective the visual arts have been in creating and shaping a sense of Mexican national identity. In a way, the Mexican Revolution inspired Los Tres Grandes in much the same way that the wilderness and landscape inspired the Group of Seven. Sometimes a painting is truly more than just a painting. That's it for part 3 of the lecture. We'll see you in part 4. Bye for now.
Is it warm enough? Yeah. thought his mom had not for you to know. Earlier, why was I even asking you why you called me?
Florence vows that her people would never be vulnerable. So she trained the Chosen Knights and decreed that their descendants would protect the kingdom for generations to come. But if you want a happily ever after, you can bet at your party. Because the monsters are always out there.
Evening, folks. We are coming to you live from the Gloradome. I'm Nick Knight.
I'm Atlanta Van Davis.
And tonight's the night we night the night. Ain't that right, ma'am?
It sure is, Nick. But this is also the most controversial wedding ceremony in 1,000 years.
You can feel the excitement and the tension.
How many minutes was this been? Should I go check the laundry? I feel like he's gonna find my laundry.
Well, the street kid with the impossible dream of being a nut.
Impossible that is until the queen herself made a shocking decision. No, he doesn't come from a noble bloodline. But he might just have the heart of a hero.
And Ballister made the most of that chance, graduating top of his institute class. A class that includes none other than
Roger stole that line. To witness the flawless pursuit and the most anticipated night of a generation.
with Ballister joining the ranks for the first time in history. Our safety will be put in the hands of a commoner.
I don't feel safe. It's not what Lord wanted.
We have the claim as we should do.
So tonight, only one question remains. Will the kingdom accept this knight who might not be right? Will the kingdom accept this knight who might not be right? There! Well, Ballister, see on the biggest thing of his life. I'm thinking.
Finish that?
Thinking this.
Mm-hmm. I'm getting all of the teeth out.
All of us. You're gonna be a knight now. Okay. Earth is still here. No one is a hero.
Are they gay?
My lords and ladies, the night is over.
That's crazy. It's gay. I wasn't expecting that. That's why I literally said no. I was like, nah.
Hey, Ballister, listen, man. I just wanted to say, I know I've always been tough on you, and I never thought you belonged here. And what? Oh, did you think I was gonna keep going? Or like, did you think I was gonna apologize for how I treated you? Oh my god, that's hilarious. So stupid.
I don't like them
So
smart
funny.
questions.
Hey, everybody, Ballister thought I was gonna apologize for treating
Yes,
him
yes.
stressed than he is.
Thanks. Mister,
Yes, smile. We'll take a picture with the real nut, not some charity gift. High five! Make that hard, slanted.
It is.
There is no greater calling for protecting this kingdom. Never let your guard down. Never weaken. Always be
Something bad about something.
I've been looking forward to this moment.
Thank you, Majesty.
My people, starting today, any of you should be able to hold the sword if you want to. If you earn it. I've watched this young guy earn it many times before. Your sword. I hereby pronounce you Sir Ballister Boldheart, hero of the realm.
He's gay! Stop!
Congratulations, Sir Boldheart. Let a new era of heroes begin with you.
Damn, he killed her! That was his fault though. That was a gay person shit. Did he really kill her in front of his
I don't think that he meant to do this. Okay, I'll be back. I'll be back. Okay, I got back.
Were you gonna put the slides on?
Yes.
You didn't wear the right one.
No, I just thought you weren't